To the Free to Be Authentic YouTube channel. We're doing a series called Financial Flow and Abundance. Let's start where you are. And this is really about helping individuals to look at their current financial situation and figure out how they can stop living without cash flow and get into a place of cash flow. And this is a really big thing for people. I think anyone who's ever been in a place of a financial crunch or where you don't have cash flow, it is overwhelming. And money sometimes just as a general topic is overwhelming for people. And abundance is a big buzzword and people really just don't know how to get there. And I think it's there's a lot of information about abundance and manifesting abundance into your life. But really, if you're drowning in your finances currently and you're not managing them, you're not actually paddling your boat downriver, but you're either spinning in circles, with one paddle, or you're stuck on the edge watching the rapid, or you're actually underwater, literally drowning every week. You're not going to be able to be in a place where you can attract abundance into your life because you're not in a place where you have that capacity. And I talk about capacity a lot. I think we all have unlimited potential and capacity, so don't get me wrong. But I think that in given situations, our capacity might be filled up with stress and fear. And so when our capacity is filled up with stress and fear, there's no room for anything else to come in. So we have to get out of that place of fear. Sometimes we just have to talk about money, even though it's scary. And sometimes we need a friend to help us get there. And so I hope to be that friend to many people. I am not afraid of a spreadsheet. I love working on this stuff. I've done a ton of research about the spiritual aspects of money, and I've talked to a lot of really smart people and achieved financial flow in my own life. So I want to share that with others. I will say I think people can be in precarious financial positions, whether they're living below the poverty level, like one of my clients, or even if they have a lot of money or trust funds or regular money coming in, they might not be managing it appropriately and they might find themselves kind of in a very precarious financial situation. So I don't think it's a situation that is based on how much money you actually have. I think it's just that money is a flow, it's a stream. And if you don't know how to navigate it and get into that flow, it can really be a force, just like water can be very forceful, even though it can also sometimes be very calm and peaceful. So I think money can be turbulent and money can be a wonderful stream. So we need to figure out how to navigate that energy of money. I had the very fortunate situation where I was able to meet a woman named Lily Ledbetter. She is a pioneer in women's rights around equal pay. She spoke at a conference I was at when I was the president of the YWCA of North Orange County, California. I was at a West Region conference. She spoke there. She introduced the Ledbetter bill to try to create equal pay. She introduced it to Washington to try to create equal pay for women. It did not pass at that time when she was speaking. She was still working on it. But she spoke to all of us, and she really drilled home to me, at least, that we need to start talking about money to each other, especially women or minorities. We need to talk about how much money we're earning. We need to talk about what our salaries are when we work for other people. Our employers, I know, hate that, and they even admonish us not to tell each other what we're getting paid. But that just creates an environment where some people are struggling more than others because they're actually getting paid less than other people, maybe in their same office or work environment, who are doing the exact same job. And then you might feel like, well, why am I struggling? Obviously, I don't know how to manage my finances as good as the guy next to me. And it could be that the guy next to you is making $20,000 more than you or $40,000 more than you. And you just don't know that. So you feel bad about how you're managing your finances because you can't afford to go out to lunch. And the truth of the matter is you're just making less. So that's a reality as well. And I think it's important for us to share our financial stories with others so people can start to see how other people live and how other people manage money and how other people survive on less or struggle with more even. I think that this is going to be helpful for everyone. So I provide this consultation for free to anyone who needs help designing their own financial freedom. And I'm going to share this next episode with you today. And I hope that it helps you um, to really step outside of your own situation, see how others are living, and I hope that inspires you. I will do this service for free for anyone who will allow me to post their results on YouTube. I do not include your name, so no one knows who you are, but I think your story, even without your name attached to it, is going to be healing for a lot of people who are in a place of lack and a place of fear and overwhelm about money. So thank you to my client who let me share their story that's coming up. I think it's going to be inspiring for some of you. It has a lot of spreadsheet work in it. I do that work. I love that work. If you're not a spreadsheet person, try to just listen along to the audio and kind of hear some of the strategies and some of the ways that you can look at the big picture and help yourself get into flow, or reach out to me and I'm happy to work with you. Also, the comment section is a great place for us to chat about similarities or differences, share tips, and I'll be sharing some of the links to different tips and strategies that I used to help this client. All right, let's get started. Hello, this is the financial consulting report that I did with you last night when we met. These are the original questions that I went through with you to see what sources of income you might have, how much you pay for rent, all of these things. So we jotted down all of your expenses and all of your sources of income last night, and then I put them into this first draft. So let me go back to the top of the page here. So the first draft, I put them into, you told me that you have work from your restaurant that you work at, your hourly paycheck that you get every 2 weeks. So we put that into $150 week 1 and week 3. You can see that you have your take-home pay from Postmates, which includes your tips. We figured that the average you take home is this number, and that's every week. You have a little side hustle where you do demos, and so you get paid twice a month on that, and that's based on the average monthly income. And then you have income you get from your roommate to pay rent, so that's here. And then you have income you get as tips from working at the restaurant, where you get the hourly wage here and you get the tips here, and that's every week. And this is based on that you work 2 days a week at the restaurant, and we know that that might get cut back to 1 day a week, but for right now, we're banking on that right now until you have some other income to replace that. And then you also nanny occasionally, and so this is an estimated earnings based on what you've done in the past 5 months. You might not get this amount every month. Some months you might get more or less. And this is already taking into consideration the big job that you'll have in October. So we're applying that towards your monthly budget. And I'm putting it at the end of the month so that we're not counting on it for rent, because it may not always come through every month. So then down here we put as a negative number, these are all positive numbers because they're income. And then I started putting in negative numbers down here for the showing the amounts that go out each month in the form of expenses. So you have your rent, which is your largest expense on the first of the month. You have your utilities. You don't use Wi-Fi, which is really great to save an expense there. You have a fairly large grocery bill every week. You have 2 children. It's still a fairly large grocery bill. It includes occasionally eating out, and you explained to me that you're really on a day-to-day basis with food because you're running on a deficit every week. So you're trying to just spend $20 a day as you earn the $20. So you're not really able to plan ahead right now. So that's a little bit of a high expense for you right now. You have an occasional pet food expense of $10. So we put that in there. You have to purchase things for the household occasionally. There's a little bit higher expense in this week because you buy laundry soap at that time. We have your car payment here, the end of the month, your auto insurance. You have a budget for gasoline, which you use your car a lot for work, so that's important. And then the oil change is factored in because you normally pay $44 maybe once every 3 months. So we just need to set some money aside so that happens. Your laundry expense is about $15 a week to go to the laundromat. You have caffeinated beverages, so you do occasionally stop into a cafe to get a bottle of water or coffee. You have the kids with you going on a lot of these jobs that you do, so sometimes you just need to grab something. So we allocated $5 a day on days that you work. For that, you're not using any recreational. We can take that out. I'm going to hide that. Or medicinal marijuana. You do attend a sweat lodge ceremony once a month. That's about $40. You do need extra childcare for that. So we put the extra childcare in there, $20. Normally you have $80 a week in childcare expenses for the days that you work at the restaurant. And then we have your tuition for your children to go to private school is here. We have, and that's that's a hopeful tuition amount that they'll work with you on tuition assistance. You received a low tuition amount like that in the past, so that's there. You pay the children an allowance every week. It's about $5 a day when they work with you. That's to keep them wanting to go to work with you, and that saves you on childcare expenses. And then that money is money that they can spend on treats, like getting ice cream or something like that. And since you have no money built into your budget for any kind of entertainment, I think that's really important for the children and a good way for them to kind of earn their own money. So that's built in there. You have charitable donations, and for you, this means just giving $1 or $2 to homeless people on the street near your restaurant when you're walking past them. They ask you for $1, and you end up, you said, giving away about $10 a month. So it's not an amount that you would ever tax deduct because you don't have a record of it, and you're filing short form taxes, so you're not going to spend the extra money to have somebody prepare your taxes where you could tax deduct that. So that's fine. And that's about $10 there. The rest of these are irregular or unexpected expenses, and I left in the ones that could come up. I think I probably need to add in that there could be like a flat tire or some kind of a car-related expense. That's not included here, so I'll add that in. But we're hoping that these never come up, so we don't have anything in here. The only thing that we know will come up is your auto registration renewal, and that's prorated per month based on what the annual charge is. So that's not something you have to budget for necessarily every month, but to the extent that you have enough money to set money aside, you would need to plan ahead for the auto renewal. So what I'm seeing here at the bottom is we've totaled up all these columns by week of the month, and I'll explain the pink week in a minute. But what we have going on here is that you're in a deficit the first week. That's because the rent expense comes in that week. In the second week, you're in a positive position just looking at that week on its own. But when you factor in the deficit from the week before, you're still in a deficit. The third week, same thing. The fourth week, same thing. And by the end of the month, you really haven't caught up. So you're running short all month substantially, and you're in a negative position at the end of the month. So that's the first thing we need to fix in order to get you into a balanced budget, is we need to figure out what can we shift around up here in order to make sure that you are in a positive number at the end of the month. And then the second thing we need to work on is figuring out how can we shift things up here, either adjust when you pay bills or come up with some strategies up here in order to make sure that you're running in a positive number all month long with a positive number at the end. Even if that positive number is only $1, we want to see that you're in a positive position. And then hopefully, once you get to this kind of cash flow space where you're running positive week to week and you're not spending more than you're taking home, then once we're in flow, then we can work on building your income revenue streams. Okay, so I worked on your budget and this is what I came up with. And I highlighted in yellow the areas that I have a strategy for you on. And I put some notes in here where we're trying to figure out, you'll see whenever there's a little red corner, it just means I have some notes here for it to remind us of what that money is for. So you have your same thing from the last page. Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed here is I added here, you were collecting $750 rent from your roommate. We talked about that maybe your roommate is thinking of leaving. You might get a new roommate. You could probably increase the rent you collect from your roommate. It looks like your rent is $1,600 a month. So I know that you were just renting one room out, so you probably didn't feel comfortable charging more than half the rent or even half the rent because the roommate really doesn't have control of the whole apartment. It's just one room. So I can see how in your mind, keeping it at $750 felt comfortable because it gave you a feeling that you had a right to more of the apartment. And with 2 children, I certainly understand that. But you have some very large utility expenses and you have a very large gas bill, and that's especially because you're paying off a back gas bill debt. So based on the over $200 a month that you're spending on utilities that you're not asking your roommate to pay for, because your roommate is paying this flat amount, I think it's more than reasonable to start thinking of your rent as being really that you pay $1,800 a month, and you're really only asking your roommate to pay $800, which is less than half. So I think you can just wrap your head around asking for $800 a month, including utilities, from a roommate to rent a room. So if you can just increase that by $50, it will actually help you a little bit, especially since this first week is a week where you have the biggest expense and you need to bring in as much money as possible. The second strategy that I have down here is your next biggest expense is your grocery budget, and you are budgeting $200 a week. And I know that right now you're kind of eating on a day-to-day basis based on the cash available that day, and you're trying not to go over $20 a day. And then you also have a $40 grocery bill each week because you need to be able to buy a few things to put in the kids' lunches for when they go to the nanny. And so that's kind of how you're living, is buying food for the day each day and then only buying groceries when you have to send food with the kids to the nanny. So my strategy here is that you would apply for WIC. I know that we talked about if you could get food assistance. You don't think that you could at this time. But WIC is a really great program that you could apply for since you have children. It's easy to apply for it and get it. They give you vouchers for certain things that you buy, like milk and different things. It's not just General Mills brands. You can buy organic milk with it. So I recommend you do that, and that would cut $20 a week off of your grocery bill. So I took $20 a week off your grocery bill. And then the other thing I did is I shifted $20 from the first week of the month to the last week of the month, because for cash flow purposes, you need to put as much money as possible into that rent bucket. So if you could buy a little extra on the last week of the month, that would support you through the first week of the month when you're putting all of the cash that you receive into the rent. So that's going to take a little bit of time to get used to kind of putting $20 aside on the last week of the month to hold you over for the first week of the month. And that may not happen right away, but I think July is actually going to be the month where you might want to start that strategy, because July is one of the months where you have a 5th week of pay. So you get paid on Mondays, and the months of the year, there's usually 4 every year. So if you get paid on Mondays, then your months where you'll have a 5th pay week is April, July, September, and December. So in July, I think you'll have a little bit of extra room to try to start holding an extra $20 out so that that first week of the month, you can apply all your cash reserves to the rent. You said you sometimes spend $10 on pet food. That comes up. I would say try to do it at the end of the month, not in the first week of the month when you know you're going to have to pay rent. And I'm sure you're probably already doing that. Like when you have to pay rent, I'm sure you're deferring everything you can to the end of the month. But try to think ahead. When you're at the end of the month, you've already paid rent and you're a little bit caught up. That's the time to think like, what do I need for the pets, so that something doesn't pop up on you, the next month when you don't have the money. You're not paying any debts back right now, and I know you have some. You also have a tax return that you rely on. So I think that you're going to have to apply your tax return probably to these debts so you can just get them wiped out. It doesn't seem like you have any room in the budget right now to be making any kind of monthly payments on these two large debts. You do spend money here and there on things that come up like toilet paper, light bulbs, trash bags. It's usually like a dollar store run, you said. That's about $10 a week. Something usually comes up, Band-Aids, whatever you need to get. And then there's an extra expense to buy laundry detergent for an extra $10. So I would say buy that laundry detergent at the end of the month after you've paid your rent and you're caught up, rather than running out of laundry detergent on the first week of the month and having to use money out of your budget that needs to go to rent. You have a car payment. And since that's kind of a flexible payment, you can pay that at any time during the month because it's with a friend. You can move that to the last week of the month without any problem. And so that takes the burden off the first week of the month when you're trying to pay rent. You pay auto insurance. I don't know what day your auto insurance is due currently, but what you can do is call your auto insurance company and ask them to change your due date to the 15th of the month, because you get a paycheck on the 15th of the month. And you also get take-home pay from other sources at that time. And so I would recommend that on the 15th of the month, that's when you pay that particular bill. And if it's currently like on the 1st due, you could always ask them just to move it to the 15th. Usually they will do that without any problem. If it's currently due on the 30th, then that's fine. You can pay it a little bit early, but find out when that's due. Make sure it's not on the 1st or the 8th, and get it moved to the 15th. You have to get gas every week. That's necessary for you to get to work. And there's no way around that one. Your oil change at the end of the month, when you have a little bit of cash reserves, is when you need to be putting some money aside, because that's going to be about $44 every quarter. And you're going to be looking for that coupon that you get to make sure that it's not a $60 oil change. Laundry is $15 a week. Right now, there's nothing you can really do about that. It's quarters, it's cash. It's not something you have to do that. Right now, you're spending $25 a week on caffeinated beverages. So you see on our budget page, that was spread out at $25 each week, because you're doing about $5 a day on the days that you work. I am going to make a radical recommendation here. You get paid on, let's see, one of your jobs, you get paid, no, you don't. You get paid, well, you get paid from Postmates. You get paid from demos. That's the job. So you get paid twice a month from demos on those weeks. I would say on the weeks that you get paid from demos, or whatever it is, that's the 15th and the 30th, the second week and the last week of the month, start to only utilize one particular cafe. Like if you use Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, they have an app you can download. Every time you purchase something, you scan the app and you get points. And then those points add up pretty quickly to a free drink. So that will help you out with that'll save you up to $5 every time you get a free drink. Could happen once a month, twice a month. The other thing is you can purchase in store a gift card for $25. And if you do that, they will give you a free drink with your gift card purchase. So on the day that you get paid on the 15th, the second week of the month, and the 4th week of the month, I want you to buy a $25 gift card, 2 $25 gift cards. Buy one day and buy one the next day, so that you have $50 in gift cards and you get 2 free drinks that week. And same thing with the last week of the month. And then those gift cards are going to sustain you until your next payday, so that you are not spending any money that first week of the month. you have that gift card to sustain you through. And you're going to start racking up points by always only going to Coffee Bean. And you're going to start getting some free beverages by buying the gift cards and using those to create some cash flow on the weeks when money's a little bit tighter. Okay. Sweat Lodge. I don't know what week of the month that is. I'm hoping it's the last week of the month because you really can't afford to do it the week that you're trying to pay rent. If it's not the last week of the month, I recommend that the last week of the month you set that money aside for the following week. And you might be able to do that in July because you're going to have an extra week in July of some income. So we'll talk about that when we look at July. Nanny or daycare expense. You might already be doing this, but I'm going to suggest that you spend that money to go to Sweat Lodge whenever that happens, the $20. But the money you spend for working, I'm going to suggest that you not pay your nanny until the 15th of the month. Like if you can make an agreement with her that you're just going to pay her once a month, not every time she babysits, but if you're just going to pay her once a month for the whole time that she's babysat, and then pay the last week on the last week, that will defer your money from here until here, so you'll have more money freed up for paying the rent. And you may already be paying her late because your rent is such a big expense. So I would just say, ask them if you can pay monthly on the 15th or 20th of the month, and then that way it's an agreement. It's not like she feels like she's being paid late. She just knows when to expect that she's going to get $240 on that third week of the month every month. And then you'll pay for the Sweat Lodge as it happens. And then the last week of the month, you can pay that as it happens. And if there's a fifth week, you'll pay that as it happens. And we'll talk about that when we look at July. Tuition. That is something that you're going to have to right now, since you have a fifth week in July. I think you've already paid it for July, but that's something where, like, for the August tuition, you're going to need to save that out of your July money because you're not going to have it on August 1st to pay it on time. And that's going to cause a big problem with the school. So you want to save that out of your last week of the month's paycheck for your next month's tuition. And that's something you're going to have to really figure out how to do. That's going to be a burden expense for you. Allowances. Is it possible to give the kids an IOU the first week of the month? You might already be doing this. I do this with my kids. Sometimes I just write IOU $5. They put it in their penny bank. And then on the third week of the month, you can trade in those IOUs for cash. It kind of teaches them a little bit about the banking system and how paper checks work. And so I think it might be fun for them if you maybe just even cut up little scraps of paper to make IOUs and dole them out like their money, and then, or like a paycheck, and then they can cash their paycheck on the third week of the month. That's going to help you defer $40 out of that first week of the month, which is so critical for your cash flow. Nonprofit causes. I'm going to say, I know that you give about $10 a month to random homeless people on the street. It's not a big deal. You can't afford to do it the first week of the month. So I'm going to say you probably could do $2 or $3 here and $2 or $3 here and $2 or $3 here, but just focusing on being more generous at the end of the month. I know it's only $2 probably that you're giving out that first week, but let's just not spend any extra money that week. I think it's okay, really, to tell people that you're in a tough position too and that you just don't have it right now. And then be more generous when you can. Hopefully you don't have any of these expenses come up, but we're going to talk about saving for that. And you do need to set aside at least $25 at the end of the month if you can, for those kind of long-term expenses like car registration that you know are going to be coming. So what this budget gets us to is cash flow by the second week of the month. The first week, you're going to be in a negative $257 position, which is not terrible. And that means you're going to be paying your rent late, which is what you've been doing. By the second week, you're going to be fine because taking the surplus you'll have in the second week plus the deficit of the rent, you're going to be able to be caught up to this number by the second week of the month. And then even though the third week has a lot of expenses were deferred to that week in itself looks like a negative, but since you have surplus still from the prior week, you're still in a positive cash flow state. And then you're still in a positive cash flow state as you get to the end of the month. And now, because we shifted a couple things around, we talked about raising the rent on your roommate and applying for WIC vouchers to apply to the groceries. Just those two savings are going to put you in a positive number at the end of the month. Now, we still have this problem where you're not able to pay your rent on the first of the month, but we've achieved cash flow now for the rest of the month. So what I'm going to recommend that you do is that you get a prepaid credit card, a $250 prepaid credit card. So that's a credit card that you put $250 on, so they give you credit. And you use that credit card to pay for the things that you can put on credit cards that first week, which are your groceries, your dollar store purchases, and your gasoline budget. So if you had the way to defer those few expenses from the first week of the month, then you would find that you will be in a positive situation, positive cash flow all month. And even on a month with 4 weeks, you'll be in a positive position. So now let's go to July. I built it out also for July. Your same budget, but I plugged back in the $750 rent you're currently collecting from your roommate because you haven't had time to put that strategy into place yet, and that you're spending $200 a week on food. And then I've added in for July this 5th week. So you're going to get paid from your job at the restaurant. You're going to have another week to do Postmates. You're going to have perhaps some additional demos that week, although you may not get paid that week. You might see that income actually next month. So I should probably take that out actually right now because we can't count on that. And then you're going to have another opportunity to collect tips from your restaurant job. And I'm just being conservative and assuming you might only have one day that week, not that you would be able to get 2 days every single week. So, and that this actually is payment for probably the week before, but it's going to work out because you get paid every other Monday, and assuming that you have 2 weeks where you're able to get 2 days and 1 week where you only get 1 day. 4 weeks where you get 2 days and then 1 week where you get 1 day. Let's just put that extra in there. And of course, anytime you make extra on tips, we try to be conservative here, or you make more money from any of your other income streams, that's just going to improve your picture. But this is kind of a conservative, realistic projection. So looking at your cash flow for July, you're going to be under at the beginning of the month. You probably paid your rent a little bit late, but you could be, if we used this strategy immediately going forward, you could be in a positive cash flow and still end the month with a little bit more of money left over because you have that 5th week of income. Now, with that 5th week of income comes a 5th week of expenses. So any expenses that you incur on a weekly basis, like food or household purchases, you said you do that about every week, gasoline, those are all going to be things that you're going to still incur on that 5th week. So you have to budget for that as well. So it's not like this 5th week of pay is all take-home pay or extra. It's going to apply to your expenses for that week. But because some of your expenses are monthly expenses like rent and utilities, then that means that you're going to have money left over, a little bit more money left over at the end of the month than you would in a 4-week pay month. The other thing I had to do in order to make your budget be in a cash flow status most of the weeks of the month was I had to shift your one of your utility payments to the end of the month. And you may already have a utility payment that can be made at the end of the month. Where do utilities go? Up here? So you may already have a utility payment that can be made at the end of the month, but assuming that they aren't due at the end of the month, the one that I chose to try to move to the end of the month is your mobile phone payment. And the reason I did that is because usually you can call your mobile phone provider and ask them for a few extra days or ask them to change your billing due date. And if your phone gets shut off, there's usually not a reconnection fee. Whereas if your electricity or your gas got shut off, that would be a bigger impact to your family. And there could be a reconnection fee, which would be more costly. So you don't want to play with those if they're not able to be moved to a later date. And if these are due on the 1st of the month, you're really going to need to ask them to shift your due date to a later day of the month. You cannot pay those when you're paying rent as well. And I have a feeling you're probably already paying them later in the month anyway, so you're probably already on that cycle. But definitely want to move the cell phone to the last week of the month. And then everything else looks pretty good on this one. On July, you see I spread out your donations. And so what I did is I gave you that journal to keep track of all your expenses and all your income starting now, just each week. So we can go into this. I put all the numbers for July in red because these are based on your budget. And what we want to start to do is track what's real. So as you find out what your actual paycheck is or what your actual take home is from Postmates that week, then we're going to update these. And when we update them, we're going to change the font to black. And that way we'll know that that's a real number, not a budgeted number. And we'll be able to get the whole month as we go through each week. We'll shift all of these to black. And then that will, so the first week we'll work on that. We'll get all of those amounts in. Second week, as you get to that week, you'll start to plug in the real numbers, and you'll do that as you go through, and then you'll see how, based on the real numbers, you'll be able to see how this number is growing or lessening, or where your budget, your cash flow is. And then based on knowing what your cash flow is looking like, if it's positive or negative, you'll be able to shift other expenses around or not overspend. I know that when you're living on such a tight budget, sometimes when you get a little extra cash, it's easy to say we're going to splurge on something. But when you have this whole big picture in your mind and you know what your month is shaping up to look like, and you know you have $24 you need to set aside for your auto registration, and you have $300 you need to set aside for your kids' tuition, when you know you have these things that you need to set money aside for future expenses, because you're looking at the whole big picture and not just taking things as they come, then that keeps you kind of on track and on budget. If this number does get to be a negative number by the end of the month, if you have bills that you were not able to pay in July, you're going to need to carry that deficit over to August. And so when we set up your August page, we're going to have to start it off with a negative number right away, which will in fact impact your first week and your ability to pay your rent that month. So we definitely don't want to do that if we can avoid it. I have these little factors up here, and those are just to remind me if you have an expense that's monthly, but you want to spread it out over 4 weeks. So we'll just take that monthly expense and we will divide it by 4.33 and plug it into each of these spaces. Same thing if you have a quarterly expense and we want to divide it out, we'll just divide that out by 13. And an annual expense, if we want to divide that out over each week, spread it out, we will divide it by 52. So those are just little factor reminders for me of how we might want to spread expenses that come up irregularly out over the course of each week. And that is it. So I am going to send this to you right now and let you digest it, and then we can get together again and talk about it and talk about your journaling and some of your strategies, and try to see what's working for you, what's not working for you. And then I think you'll find quite quickly that once you get into this habit of making sure that you always have positive cash flow and that you're planning ahead, it's a mind shift. Then you'll be able to focus on the burden of always being late and behind and paycheck to paycheck will be off of you, and you'll be able to focus a little bit more on additional revenue streams. One thing I want to talk to you about is figuring out how to apply for funds from an outside agency to help pay your tuition and childcare expenses. So I know you've been able to do that in the past and you've kind of let it go because it's a big paperwork burden for you. But I think once you're freed up financially from that stress, you'll have the capacity then to kind of figure out some additional strategies. The other strategy that I think you might want to consider for groceries, once we get this grocery bill down by applying the WIC vouchers, another strategy is to rethink what grocery store you're shopping at, or maybe switch up your grocery store sometimes. If you can find like a $10 off groceries coupon, it might be a fun thing for the kids when you bring in kind of those mailers from the mailbox. There's lots of different coupons just to go through the grocery store ads and see if there's any that are just generic $10 off groceries. Each grocery store will put those out at certain times of the year. And so if you find Vons has $10 off groceries this week, you might shop at Vons this week. Or I know Sprouts does it sometimes, different grocery stores. So I know that you don't have the capacity right now to be clipping a bunch of coupons and that you're buying a lot of already prepared foods. But if you can find that generic $5 or $10 off coupon from time to time, that's going to save your budget as well. And it might be kind of a fun scavenger hunt that you could set the kids up to do. All right, that's all I got. And then I will build out the rest of the months for you at least as templates. And now that we know which months are the 5-week months, I'll plug those in for you. And then I'll help you keep track of it until you feel like you can really manage it yourself. The other thing you could do is, if the spreadsheet is overwhelming, is you could set up jars, like set up a jar in your kitchen where you always label it $24. So you always put $24 on the 4th week of the month in that jar, and that's going to be your auto registration renewal jar. And so there's a few things like that. Like I think you had the $14 towards your oil change. So some things like that you could put into a jar. Tuition money, maybe there's an envelope that you put the money at the end of the month into that. So you know that when you get extra money in, you're putting it into those kind of savings vehicles, and you're not treating them like they're actually extra money, because they're not. They're money that you need to save for expenses that are going to be coming up really quick, and keeping your cash flow working so that when it's time for that auto registration renewal, you already have all the money in the jar ready to go. All right, that's it. Thanks. Bye.